Hi, this is Aaron McLisky, and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ben. Welcome back.
Hey, welcome to you too. And I'm glad everybody has survived my voice last week.
Yeah, you definitely had a Barry White thing going on, but we only got 17 emails of complaint about you. No, of course. Nobody complained. And I'm glad to have you here to do some of the heavy lifting this time. So it's not all on my plate. Yeah.
They don't tell you when you have kids, but if I know this is the Cinematography Podcast and not the child rearing podcast, but as soon as you have kids and you put them in school, they're going to come home with colds and you're just going to be sick all the time. That's just life. And in this era, what that means is you're going to be testing yourself for COVID all the time.
It is a reality of the days we are living in.
Oh my God.
Hey, who is on the show today?
I could not be more excited. It is Aaron McLisky, the DP of Talk to Me, which is definitely my favorite movie that I have seen this year. And
wow,
it's
you've been talking it up for weeks. So yeah, that's great.
I love the movie. I loved our conversation. He talks about and gives really good advice to how to be bold when you're making a movie and you don't have infinite resources and infinite days to shoot. How to have some sack. How to make bold, cool choices, because that movie is full of them.
It's an interesting turn of phrase.
Yeah.
Interesting turn of phrase. Have some sack.
Yeah. I think it's a great movie. I think it's great looking. I'm really impressed with everything that they did. And it's one of those cases where I went and saw a movie and then reached out to the DP on social media and they reached back. So it was much like the hand in Talk to Me. Aaron reached back.
Good times.
So Ilya, what is our close focus today?
And now, close focus.
So for a close focus today, I thought we'd talk about the Union Solidarity Coalition, which is a group of people who got together during the 2023 WGA strike, so just in the last couple of months, and watching people come out and join the picket lines, they felt inspired and they wanted to do something to take action and create unity. And so what they've done is created a charity auction and have gotten a lot of celebrities and people of note. It's to benefit coworkers of the industry unions who are out of work right now and have been losing their health insurance. And so they are directing financial support to crew members specifically. And, because it's really crew members who are really getting the short end of the stick right now, because crew is not striking, but there's very little crew work to go around. And crew is the casualty. Crew makes far less money than everyone below the line is making far less money than people above the line in general. Maybe not exclusively, but quite often. And when there isn't a lot of work for anyone above the line, there's no one working below the line either. So what happens is that there's these different cycles of strife and contract negotiations, and IATSE had theirs, a while back. And sometimes actors and writers and editors and other people come out to support various different unions, depending on what the strike might be. And there is a lot of solidarity, but usually as a whole, you don't have like IATSE right now standing up and saying all IATSE members are also on strike. They want IATSE members to work because, if they can work, if there is something they can work, because they have to make a living. But at the same time, there's a ton of IATSE that is out there right now on the picket line with the WGA, with the actors, and they are doing everything they can to try to convince the studios that they need to listen to the demands, sign a deal, and put everyone back to work. So the Union Solidarity Coalition, they've come up with this really, really cool auction, and they've got a lot of great people to put forward random, bizarre, fun things. Like if you would like to have dinner with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross, you can do that right now, and the winning bid is $10,200.
Wow.
For also about $5,100, you could be in the lead on bids for having Lena Dunham paint a mural in your home. And what's really fun about this is that a lot of the celebrities and other people
what if I want
on
Lena
social
Dunham
media
to paint a mural of my home that's the entirety of the outside of my house, only one color? That's a bargain, right?
That would be a bargain if you were trying to get Lena Dunham to paint your house. But I have a feeling it's probably limited to like a 24 by 36 sort of like, size or something. I'm not sure.
Lena Dunham's too smart to fall for my ruse.
What's quite fun, though, is that all of the celebrity memes that have come out of this, like Natasha Lyonne posted that she would love to bid on refinishing a bedside table with David Lynch, and that she would bid on that all day long. And there's been a whole lot of other people who've put forward these these wishful thinking, memes of like what they wish they could bid on to have happen. Because like Adam Scott, currently, if you want to be in the lead, $2,000 will walk your dog in Los Angeles for an hour. So if you'd like to have a celebrity walk your dog, Adam Scott is volunteering to do it. And all the money that they raise is going to go to support crew people. So I think it's really cool. You can, we'll put links to this in the show notes.
I want to go boating with Werner Herzog. Do you think Werner Herzog would let us go boating with him?
You could certainly make a meme about it. And I'm pretty sure that you get a lot of laughs and support and applause. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of fun, kooky thing that is going on. It's the Union Solidarity Coalition. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who've signed up to do it. John Lithgow has signed up to do different things. Yeah, he will paint a watercolor portrait of your dog. That's a good deal.
John Lithgow is a really good painter. Like he's the real deal. He's not messing around.
That's awesome. And there's all kinds of other things too. Like you can get on a Zoom call with Nicole Kidman and Lulu Wang. I mean, there's like, there's just a lot of.
I don't know what I would say to them on a Zoom call, but yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a story currently in the Hollywood Reporter, which kind of gives all the broad strokes and does have references some of the memes. The Varnish a Cabinet with David Lynch for $10,000 benefits charity. That's Natasha Lyonne's pick. She's like, if it was real,
but that's a fake one, right?
That's a fake one, yes. So, but you may see some of this on social media. There's people who are sharing this right now. It's kind of a thing.
Awesome.
Anyway,
awesome. So let's get to our interview here with Aaron McLisky.
Let's do it.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
All right, so I'm here, and by here I mean from Los Angeles to Australia. Where in Australia are you?
Currently, I am in Sydney, Australia.
Awesome, with Aaron McLisky. And anyone who listens to the show knows that I went and saw a little movie that didn't even get that much promotion over here, but it's been a huge hit, called Talk to Me. And couldn't stop talking about it. I went and saw it twice in the theater. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Aaron.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. It's so exciting to be able to speak about this little film that's gone from the suburbs of Adelaide to Hollywood. So it's super exciting.
Holy crap! I brought two different groups of friends to see it, and sneaking away to go to a movie in the theater is hard enough. But I was like, I saw it the first time, and I've seen so many horror movies that I'm just inured to all the tricks. And so when I see one that actually like surprises, scares, makes me feel anything, I don't feel the tricks coming. I'm like, oh, I need to see it again to kind of dissect what y'all were doing.
Awesome.
So give us the pitch. What's the story of Talk to Me?
I guess the way that I've always spoken about it is, it's a cautionary tale about a bunch of youth in the Adelaide suburbs who discover an embalmed hand. And when they start using it for the wrong things, the consequences become quite horrific. So, for me, it's always been a tale that sort of speaks to a horror genre audience, but also has a sort of a drama element that, is quite really powerful when it speaks to this idea of mental health and sort of insidious thoughts and potentially, drug culture in a youth context, because I feel like those themes are strong in the film. So, but yeah.
So how did the film come to you? Like, it's a very Australian movie. In fact, as an American, it probably took me about 10 minutes each time I saw it to kind of just get used to the language, the vernacular everyone was speaking, because it's different enough from how we talk over here. But how did it come to you? Because I'm always, whenever we talk to somebody, like Mandy Walker or whoever from Australia, it's like Australia has such an amazing and rich film industry that I think rivals our own. And it's interesting to me, even though we share a language, like how few of your movies end up coming over here. And so I don't really understand the machinations of your business. I know it's very different the way it works over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's firstly, it's very exciting that a small Australian independent film has had such an international impact. And, whenever Australians are making films, we're always keeping the intention that it will be something that, would translate overseas whilst maintaining like a strong Australian voice. So I think this project particularly, for me, was really exciting because it obviously has a genre element that speaks to a very, very sort of strong audience. But I also think intentionally we wanted to make a film that was slightly location agnostic. Like, I think if you look at the film, it's not sort of sweeping Australian landscapes. It's very domestically driven. It's quite a small film. I mean, obviously the accent is hard to get around, but I think we did try to sort of keep things a little bit more international with the intention that hopefully it traveled overseas and that it would speak to a broader audience. So, that was definitely something that we were conscious of. But the way that the project came to me was that it was over a period of maybe 6 months where I had been hearing sort of murmurs that this script was floating around. And I was actually on set shooting Mr. In Between, season 3. And I was speaking
awesome show. And we'll definitely talk about Mr. In Between, but it's a great series that for any of our American listeners, it's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. No, that was a great series that I shot with Nash Edgerton, but I was speaking to one of the cast members who was actually doing a tape for this little film, and we sort of chatted, and he said, man, there's this little horror film that's floating around and it's really exciting. So I reached out to my agent and tried to see if there was a way that we could get the script. And it just so happened that concurrently the directors were looking for cinematographers. And I had done a short film called Nursery Rhymes, directed by Tom Noakes, who's a very successful commercials director now. And they had seen that short film on Vimeo or something, and they actually had sought me out through social media. So I got this ping on I got a DM, and Danny had reached out, and he said, was sort of curious to know what my availability was like, where I was based, and whether I'd be interested in looking at a project. And it just so happened to be this project that I was also hearing murmurs about, and I said, of course, this sounds great. Send through the script. So as soon as I got my hands on the script and read it, I thought, this is a fascinating project. I did a little bit of research on the Raka Raka, which, to be completely honest, was slightly terrifying. Just because, they have quite a strong YouTube, history, success.
Yeah.
When you look at the work, and obviously they became famous sort of prior to a lot of, I guess you'd call like censorship laws and sort of, things, because their content was ultra violent. And I think what was fascinating about them is they're sort of these grassroots, self-taught, filmmakers in their own right, telling these sort of like really ambitious stories, but like at a very, very sort of grassroots level. They shot everything themselves, they edited everything themselves, but they went to such extremes. That's obviously what caught the world's attention.
Well, they did like a lot of like wrestling stuff too, right? Like that's just real. It's like not it's really not simulated. It reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary called Not Quite Hollywood, but it's about Australian exploitation movies of like the 60s and 70s, and how those guys, like if they were going to drive a car through a house, the way they did it was they got a house and they drove a car through it. Like there was no faking it.
No, and I think that's the thing about the boys is that they have a sort of strong background in believing that, if there's a will, there's a way, I think. And, listening to sort of their stories of what they had done in the past, I think a lot of safety officers and producers were, a little bit nervous. But look, I think the early conversations with them were really intelligent, and obviously with the support of Causeway and what the producers were doing during development, trying to maintain a maturity of storytelling. The boys really had strong ideas about how they wanted this to be cinematic, because they, in some ways, they wanted to prove to the world that they are serious filmmakers, and this was an opportunity to do so. And that to me was quite motivating to sort of hear that they had this intention to sort of move away from YouTube style content, which they were very cognizant that it's for a brand. It's for an audience that they understand, and the style of content that they do is very much sort of intellectualized. They understand exactly kind of what the people want. But then this project was a departure from that. They never wanted to alienate their audience, so we always talked about the influence of the Raka Raka on this movie and when it was appropriate and when it wasn't. And so I think the process of getting to understand their intention and what this project was going to be in their minds made me a little bit more sort of confident that I could join this project, because my ideas of the project was, that it needed to be elevated, it needed to be sophisticated, it needed to have a maturity, because I'm not interested in sort of throwing away that opportunity, because I think, if we can make something special that can speak to a truth or, that can connect with the audience, like that's what I do this for. So, it was nice to hear them talk about it like that.
Yeah, well, and when you talk about elevated, I know this is more of a writing thing than anything else, but what I appreciate about the movie is you see in the horror movies that give horror movies a bad rap, in my opinion, are the ones where you have a character doing something way dumber than what they would actually do, or for reasons that don't make sense, because you have an idea for a scene in which the monster or whatever is going to kill them, so you need to make them vulnerable to it or whatever. And what I appreciated, especially the second time I saw it, was that you never have a character in this movie do the dumb thing. You have the character do the smartest thing that they would do, or if it's not smart, it's something that there's a I don't want to spoil major plot points, but there's like a compelling reason why the character is doing what they're doing that makes internal sense. And even if as an audience member you're like, no, oh my God, stop, like you understand the reasoning for why that's happening. From a cinematography standpoint, when you say that you wanted to make sure that it was elevated, like what did and does that mean to you?
Yeah, I guess, like my history of sort of, like, I guess my school of cinematography has been slightly non-traditional. I didn't do a very traditional pathway to sort of get to where I'm at. And so to develop this idea of like an elevated approach of cinematography really means to me, an integration of the visual sort of format in storytelling. So it's really about story first, obviously, like we're all, always, I never want to distract from sort of the story and performance, but bringing another level and another layer of storytelling through cinematography is how I always see it, as elevated, as sort of its intention is present and helps aid the story. So for this film, it wasn't just about capturing the actors performing, it was about how does every frame compositionally, from a lighting perspective, like how does the camera movement, how does it all speak to a world and a language that is truthful to sort of the character's reality or the perspective in a scene. It was just about really sort of being able to flex, or sort of like demonstrate how cinematography can really help elevate a tone. And I think that for me is what this genre is really helpful with, because there's so many ways we could have shot this film, and we spoke about a lot of them, but I think we really landed on some, really interesting concepts to apply to each scene to help tell the story and really get inside the sort of psychological breakdown of our main character, and also like understanding the rules of possession and how possession is perceived by the person who's possessed or the people who are witnessing the possession. There was a lot of sort of like logic built around the camera and how the camera was helping the audience understand, or how we would withhold information to sort of bring up the fear and understand what is a jump scare and is it appropriate to apply in the scene, or do we not want to do that? And I think those conversations were really exciting for me, because that is ultimately how I feel we can elevate, or I hate to use the word, but bold. Like sometimes you're on set and you get nervous that you don't have options, and that you feel like maybe we just need to get a shot from here or a shot from there just because we're concerned about the edit. And my background, I actually started as an editor, so I am constantly thinking about editing and have an strong opinion about sort of how sequences will edit. And so when we are sort of discussing coverage ideas or sort of how we wanted to shoot, certain scenes, it was quite exciting to be bold and to sort of commit to, because on a very short schedule and a low budget film, you don't have a lot of time. And so the best way through it is to just make really clear decisions and be quite specific. And that kind of was what was exciting about the project. And the boys' approach is that they were often saying, we don't need it. We're good. This scene is told. That frame says 1,000 things, and that frame also tells us what's happening. We don't need any more. And that was super refreshing because A, it satisfied a schedule constraint, and B, it just was, it felt bold on set. It felt like we were like going for it. If we're going to give it a go, let's be really decisive about what our perspective is on this film.
Can you give me an example of what you would have considered kind of like a bold choice to take?
At the beginning of the film, we made a very bold decision to never show the father. There's a wake, sort of like a Remembrance Day scene, and you'll notice that there is no coverage of the father. It's all told from her perspective, and you just hear his disembodied voice. When we're in the kitchen, we used focus and we used a shallow depth of field to push the father further away, and we never saw his face. You don't actually meet the father until about halfway through the film. This kind of like philosophy of saying, you know what, their relationship is estranged. Like they've obviously gone through this traumatic experience where the mother has committed suicide, and this disconnect between them is strong, and we wanted to visually amplify that feeling. And these were a couple of devices and decisions that we made to just say, yep, we're not covering it. We're not shooting. We're not going to shoot the father in this. We're not going to get a close up. We're not going to, this is it. This is the shot, moving on. And I think that was really exciting to go, really? Like, great. Like, okay, let's be consistent in this approach and really stick to what we believe is the way to go. So that's just one example of many where I think we were often, being quite decisive about, coverage ideas because we felt as a compositionally or from a lighting perspective that we didn't need to go any further. Like we had told the story. So that was kind of interesting to work in those conditions.
Did your editor brain look at that and go like, yeah, that'll work? Or were you ever like, we should cover our asses?
I think, you know what, like my editor brain would always kick in. And I think, there was a lot of times where, we did push back on the boys and would say, I think, maybe we need a little bit of sort of insurance here. And the producers would often say that. It became actually more a debate about close-ups and when to use them and when to get them. And I think my editor background would always tell me to sort of think about entries and exits to scenes and how do we get from here to there. And often I would be suggesting or discussing that. But the boys were also editors as well. So we were always sort of talking about it. And to be honest, one of the really great things was the boys would actually go and edit the day's rushes that night and bring it to set the next day.
How do you have that much energy? How can you do that?
Honestly, like the lack of sleep, was the thing that I could never understand. And the way they were able to maintain their energy and positive vibe, they'd come to set every day, music blasting, happy, like super excited because they'd cut the day before. They'd cut a little assembly for themselves, and they're going, look, it works. Like, we got it all. Also, occasionally we'd be like, we really missing a piece. Like this piece we need to get. And that was really helpful because that doesn't often happen. And so that sort of like conversation about edit was always happening. And I was able to play a big role in that as well, just because we were able to speak about how a scene would feel. I'd watch these little edits and I'd make my notes and comments and say, look, I think maybe we do need to go back and get this little angle or this little pickup here. And so that was really a fun process to be part of because it's very, very rare that happens.
And before we move off of Talk to Me, can you tell me sort of about your lighting philosophy, your approach to the lighting? Was there an arc to it? Like, did it start off lit one way and then go another way? Was there a lighting complement to the possession scenes? Were those lit differently? I know the makeup on people was a little different during those scenes.
Yeah, I think in early pre, we spoke about what this world looks like. There was a lot of discussion about where do we sit. When I was even testing lenses and cameras and just trying to decide like what is our package for this, project, like the boys would often reference films of realism, very sort of day in the life dramas where the horror will be, something that is quite shocking because you're bedded into sort of this naturalism, this world that feels real. And then obviously when something goes wrong, it's a lot more shocking. So I think from a lighting perspective, I often move more towards a naturalistic thing, and I really work with production design to understand the sort of quality of light, the density of light, the color. And so working with Bethany Ryan, the production designer, on how practically led this film was going to be, knowing that I'd have to shoot 360, was a big part of pre, and understanding what Mia's world felt like. And we sort of discussed the different sort of practical fittings and fluorescents and this sort of greenish blue color that would come through in her house because it felt disconnected and she was sickly. And this idea that at the start of the film she had a cold and that her immunity was down, and that the spirits were actually getting into her because she was sick and wet, and there was this sort of stickiness to that world. And so we worked in terms of like lighting and skin and what that felt like in her world, and we tested various things versus going into sort of the more warmer, inviting, tungsten lit world that when she goes over to her friend's house, she feels more at home. And that was a sort of a lighting approach that we took there, so that it sort of felt warm and inviting, and that when you see the two worlds in contrast, you kind of understand where she's coming from, why she wants connection with this family, and why she feels so estranged from this world and she wants this. And then also, like when the possession scenes occur, how I was going to introduce unmotivated lighting to elevate again. So you would, when people were being possessed, I would introduce accents of lights that necessarily weren't there, slight color variations that weren't there, just to sort of lift you out of reality for a second so that I could dump you back in. And so that was a lot of sort of the discussion about how I would sort of find and motivate those lights. I know in the second possession, I was really excited about the fish tank, because the fish tank, the tones in the room were very warm and sort of magenta-y and almost yellowish, but I needed this cool justification so I could add those accents of cool light. So this fish tank, which the production designer had designed into the space, gave me that motivation. So I was able to use the space to inform my lighting approach. And as the film, as Mia's psychological decay, as her unraveling occurs throughout the film, the lighting slowly becomes slightly more darker. There's a slight shift in color. We slowly desaturated the film as it goes along, just to sort of, it's very subtle.
Are you doing that with lighting, or are you doing that in the grade?
That was a grade thing, to be honest. Like that lighting, because of, as the film sort of goes towards the end, it becomes a lot more sort of, we're in the hospital, we're outside. We also chose to do sort of one of the sort of most intense scenes in the daytime, which I thought I always struggled with. I always was like, how are we going to make this prosthetic look good in the daytime? Because, often to your eye, everything works better in shadows and sort of, like shaping that and sort of hiding any imperfections. But with full respect for the MEG, the makeup effects group that did the prosthetics, it looked so real that, shooting it in the daytime was not a problem. It was just incredible, the work that they did. So to sort of sum up the lighting approach, it was subtle. It was definitely motivated by the naturalism, and then I added accents of sort of, when we were going through possessions, of sort of fear. And then the grade, there was a slight desaturation that occurred throughout the film to sort of suggest the life is leaving her. She's really losing her mind, and she's sort of being led down a path that she's being propelled to this conclusion that, she needs to do what she does. But yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. So let's talk a little bit about, you and your career leading up to this. I always want to know, what was the moment in your life where it occurred to you that cinematography was a job, and it was a job you would want?
So I think, the fast-tracked version of me is, I was born in Australia. My father worked in public relations, and he started a small arm of his company in Indonesia. I moved to Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
I grew up as an international student. I was heavily influenced by sort of American culture and American schooling system. And I actually fell in love with photography when I was in Indonesia. And I was, there was a photography class that I did. And sort of, from there, I found a videography class that I did. And I fell in love with with image making. And so when I went to university, I was obviously seeking a film school. I looked at America, and my parents were like, that's going to be too expensive as an international student. You're going to have to go home, which, was a good option. I wanted to go to AFTRS, which is the Australian Film, Television, Radio School, but sadly it was only postgraduate. So I enrolled in a university close by, which was Macquarie University. I did like a media degree, but it was also I sort of focused on anthropology, just because I'd grown up as in a Muslim culture, and I'd always been really fascinated by cultural comparisons, and I thought at that point, like documentary and sort of photojournalism was sort of the world I would head into. And after sort of finishing university, I had a really good network of film friends, and anthropological film just wasn't the world I thought it was. It's not documentary. It's very different. It's academic. I got a job as a junior editor at a production company, just sort of, because I had this passion to get into filmmaking and I couldn't figure out a way in. And I was trained as an editor. So that's sort of where I began. And through this company, I sort of grew a bit of a sort of a network, and I learned about editing, and I was, cutting little commercials and different things, and meeting directors and watching sort of that system work. And it sort of wasn't until a few years of doing that I was sort of promoted to directing, and I was suddenly directing commercials and, directing, shooting and editing things, just because at that time digital revolution was happening and I could suddenly get my hands on a camera. And I sort of got to this point maybe in my early 20s where I thought, this, I still don't feel right. I'm not completely in love with this path. I was shooting music videos and short films with my friends, and nothing was feeling right. And I actually moved to New York City. Obviously, growing up in Indonesia, a lot of my friends were Americans, so one of my best friends was living in New York at the time, and I just thought, what better time, if I'm going to go, and I'm just going to go to this city, I'm just going to, immerse myself and sort of see if I could figure out exactly, which direction I wanted to go. And I met a producer who was actually a neighbor of mine. I was living in the Lower East Side, and she was producing like short music videos or short films. And she got me to work on one of her short film sets, in the lighting department. And I got chatting with the DP, and I just became fascinated by sort of the approach that he had and his philosophy. And I think it all became clear to me that that's sort of the direction I wanted to go, that I'm a storyteller, but in my own projects, in my own things, I was always leaning towards the visuals, and I was always spending more time really articulating the visuals and less sort of like, really working with the actors and it became very clear to me that I wanted to go back to the original roots of what got me inspired to be part of this, which was photography and image making. And I left New York and I came home and I went, I'm making a complete career shift. I'm going to do it. I started doing little camera assisting jobs here and there, which didn't work out very well because I never found myself. I wanted more, I wanted to be in front of it. I wanted to be making decisions. And, because of my network, and it wasn't until I shot a music video with these, ironically, these YouTubers called the Bondi Hipsters, who were at the time quite successful, and they had just gotten a television series off the ground for a local ABC sort of network show. And they're in their second season, and their DP had decided to move on, and they're looking for someone. And I just shot a music video with them, and they thought, God, Aaron would be good for this. But obviously the completion guarantors, the insurance companies were like, we're not, like, who is this guy? Like, there's no way. So the boys actually petitioned for me to be the DP, and through a bit of sort of a process of pitching, why I would do well, and the sort of sanctions they would place on me just in case I wasn't performing and they needed to fire me. That was all. That was pretty exciting. So suddenly I was given this opportunity.
That's a huge leap right there. That's
huge. A jump into the fire. And I found myself on set, with a cast and crew, and everyone's looking at me, going, "What the are we doing? Like, you're the boss. You tell us where to go." I was working with operators and gaffers, and it was like, okay, here we go. Like. And,
how long did it take you to get used to that level of production?
Oh, look, I'm still getting used to it. But, I think that it's my natural space. Like, I love to be the decision maker. And as long as you were decisive and clear about your decision making, whether it be right or wrong, I think people, it takes a while, right? Because people would always look at me, who's this young guy who hasn't done anything, like he's making mistakes. But I just had an openness to me and sort of like a humbleness that, it definitely, I didn't want to be taken advantage of, but I was clear. But I think that it took me a little while to sort of realize that I didn't need to be as open to suggestions all the time. That was sort of a process of learning that I was able to close myself off a little bit to sort of be more decisive. But I think as I've in my career have gone on to various scale of project, there's a different Aaron that needs to sort of be applied to the different projects, I guess.
So just curious, in the wake of Talk to Me, because it's kind of a sleeper hit around the world, does your phone start ringing off the hook? Do you start getting a lot of offers? Has it changed your life? Or like I always talk to people, it's like, they shot the film at one Sundance and nothing really changed at that time. Like what difference has it made in your life?
Look, I think, for me, it's made a huge difference in the sense of doors opening up and conversations that I'm now having. Obviously, the writer's strike, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like a lot of projects are on pause and we're waiting for that to be resolved. And I'm in full support of the strike and believe that hopefully that, we come out with better conditions for all. But I believe that in the strike, it means that a lot of people are probably more available to talk to some, unknown Australian DP. So that has been a positive. I've seen quite a few scripts come to me. There's a slight feeling of, as time passes, I feel like, Talk to Me's success is like kind of mind-blowing. I think it was only a few days ago that it was announced that it's the highest grossing A24 horror film ever. It's just past Hereditary.
I read that too.
So incredible. So to be sort of put in that same conversation is mind-blowing. And, being back in Sydney and sort of reading all this press and it's quite surreal because, you're like, it's this little film that we shot is now just everywhere. And I'm getting a lot of people reaching out and asking questions and sort of, through Instagram and different social channels.
That was how I reached you.
Yeah, like it's been really interesting to sort of see the reception in different countries and different people. So it's definitely been a huge boost to my career. I think it's got a little bit more attention than I would have ever expected. So it's helped me to start to speak to people. Has it led on to directly to a project? No, I not yet. I think the timing is probably not great. Back end of this year and next year, there'll be some really interesting projects for me to dive into. That's the hope, because I'm just keen to keep going, keep building.
Cool. So I feel like I've used up enough of your time here. Before we go, could you tell people where they can find you online if they want to see your work, if they want to interact with you?
Yeah, if you want to hit me up, you can find me on Instagram, Aaron McLisky, and you can go to my website to see my work, aaronmclisky.com. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait to see what you do next, and congratulations for everything that happened and is continuing to happen with Talk to Me.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that was Aaron McLisky.
I cannot wait to see what he does next. Also, cannot wait to see what the directors of Talk to Me do next. Oh my God.
Hey, Ben, here's one more of those fake auction things you might appreciate. Hannah Waddington of Game of Thrones will follow around a person of your choosing, shouting shame.
That's fake?
Yeah, it is fake. But, I think it would be great. It would be great if that
would be great. True. That would be perfect.
All right. So, hey, Ben, it's time to pay the bills.
All right.
We got to thank our fine friends over at Aperture, makers of high quality lights. They are having a moment right now. Aperture went out and bought themselves another company. Which I don't know if,
what company?
Oh, yes. It's a company called ProLight. ProLight was spelled a little bit funny. It was spelled in a sort of German spelling of Lycht, for the light part of it. But ProLight had made a lot of waves in a very short period of time, bringing the first really popular RGB ACL system to the industry. ProLight came out with this relatively affordable, very high quality light engine that makes all of the different colors without using any white light at all, but they use them mixed to make white. And boy, did they really capture the imagination, and were really kind of going places and found very quick adoption on the high end. And at Hot Rod, we had several clients who were getting rid of tungsten lights. They were completely changing out the lights on their trucks and putting in ProLight. Well, Aperture said, we want some of that. and they bought them out. And they just were at IBC, and they made a couple of new announcements, how they're kind of fusing ProLight's peanut butter with their chocolate. And they've got, new light engine technology and some of their own magic all working together now to create new products. And, we will see. But one of the first things they announced was that all ProLight lights, of which there's two very popular ones called a 300 and a 675, they had their own wireless app system. Well, they're going to get an update, a firmware update, and now they're all going to be compatible with Aputure's Sidus Link. And Sidus Link has already become very, very popular out there. And it's sort of a alternative system to wireless DMX. People can use their phone to control the lights. And so now anyone with ProLight can have their lights work, or very shortly, as soon as the firmware is released, work seamlessly with Aputure lights. And that's all kind of a very cool, fun, new thing that Aputure is bringing to the community. They purchased this company, but rather than leaving all the people who had invested in those lights behind, they have a firmware update so that they're going to be able to take their old lights and make them work with new lights and continue in the new Sidus Link ecosystem, which I think is really cool. They really did something fun here, and good on them for looking out for ProLight customers, because they had a lot of them, and there's a lot of people out there really enthusiastic about ProLight products. I know that there's still some left over at Hot Rod Cameras, and you can get some really good deals right now on ProLight stuff because they're effectively going to be discontinued. So we have some really amazing deals on ProLight 675s and 300s, which are the flagship lights. So if you're in the sound of my voice and you're interested in ProLight and you never picked it up and you always thought to yourself, God, I really wish ProLight lights worked with Aputure's Sidus Link. Well, wonder no longer. According to the president of Aputure USA, Ted Sim, it was announced 2 days ago at IBC, so it should be coming out quite soon.
That's awesome.
And now, short ends.
So Ben, it is our short end time of the show. What is your obsession this week? What are you all about?
Well, kind of a twofer here. The first one, and I'd say the main one, is my friend Ed Sanchez, who we've threatened to have on the show more than once.
We should just do it. We should just make it happen.
We should. I should just call him up and say, hey, Ed, get on the goddamn show.
Send him an Instagram message.
I could text him. He is part of an anthology horror film that I have not seen yet. In all fairness, I'm going to probably go see it tomorrow night. It's in theaters in some cities, and it's going to be streaming everywhere, called Satanic Hispanics. It's an anthology film of like 4 or 5 stories, and Ed directed one of them. Mike Mendez, who directed a movie I love called Big Ass Spider. Mike Mendez directed one of them. Damian Rugna, who did Terrified, not to be confused with Terrifier, but Terrified from Argentina, one of the scariest movies I've seen in years. Just love it. Anyway, it's like the lineup of filmmakers in this is pretty amazing. There's only 2 credited DPs on IMDb. I don't know if they just rotated through all of them or if everyone brought on their own DP and they're just not on IMDb yet. But we've got Luke Bramley and Matthias Schubert are the 2 credited DPs. But anyway, I just want to say, if you have a chance and you want to see a cool indie film, it's a good kickoff for spooky season. We're moving into Halloween season, and I'm definitely very excited to see it. Not just because my friend was one of the directors, but in general, I think it looks cool. So the other thing that I wanted to bring up was there was all this enormous black magic news this week. You would know more about the cameras, but actually it was Kays who was telling me about it, and they have a camera app for your iPhone that gives you full professional controls on your iPhone. And I downloaded it and I kicked the tires with it a little bit. And I would say I've messed with a few apps that are kind of quasi pro camera apps for your iPhone. And I would say by far, this is the easiest one to use with the fewest buried menus. Cause like if you're trying to get pro features out of an iPhone, which is kind of an oxymoron anyway, but if you're trying to get pro features out of an iPhone, what you don't want to do is you're probably not making a feature film on it. You're probably filming your kid's soccer game. You don't want to get lost in menus. You want to just be able to access whatever you want. But it gives you shutter control, and it gives you ISO control, and it gives you speed control and all kinds of cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out. And it's free, by the way. Did I mention it's free? It's free. If you have an iPhone, you can download it. You risk nothing.
I'm very much actually looking forward to that myself as soon as they come out with an Android version, because I'm not on an iPhone. But but I got to say, they did include the very cool feature originated, to my knowledge, by Thomas Worth of VHS Cam fame, where you can hold your camera vertically but you'll record a slice out of the sensor to have a horizontal view.
Ooh,
So
I haven't seen that.
You can get a 16:9 while holding your camera in the 9:16 method, which I think is really cool. And yes, I very much would like that, because I think that that's a great way to be able to do stuff, especially since there's plenty of resolution now in a lot of these cameras, and probably having, and by cameras, I mean the cameras inside your phone, and having a slice like that probably would have a certain patina. Might actually look quite nice. So we'll see.
I got to say, actually, like on a more than one professional job, having an iPhone has saved my ass, where I was able to get a shot with the iPhone that I could not get with the real camera. And it made the cut, and no one complained. One time I had the client be like, "Is that just your iPhone?" And I'm like, "Yeah, look at the shot though. It looks cool, right?" And
yeah. And I think that new Blackmagic app's only going to have more people doing that sort of thing now. And I think that it's awesome that they made such a thing. I can't wait to play with it once it reaches the other, 70%.
The dark side. Enjoy your Android phone. Anyway, Ilya, what is your short end now that I've monopolized the world and brought up two?
Well, I got another article. It's actually from July of this year. Somehow I missed it and just found it today. It's an article about Ben Affleck in Film and Digital Times, which, Film and Digital Times, run by a friend of mine, John Fowler. He puts together sort of this trade publication for the technical side of the industry. And what was random to me is you don't usually see, actors inside of there, but Ben Affleck.
Well, he's also an Oscar-winning director. I mean, like, just side note, Ben Affleck, directed a movie that won Best Picture.
Of course, but you don't have those people typically in Film and Digital Times. My whole point is that he was there discussing shooting D camera on air, and he gets into it with John Fowler, and they talks about lenses and cameras, and it turns out Ben Affleck, big camera and lens nerd, which I would not have expected. And when you get through the whole article, down near the bottom, basically John Fowler calls him out. It's like, you're kind of a member of our camera and lens geek society. And Ben Affleck says, "Man, I get made fun of it. It's a very serious addiction." And he lists the different lenses that he has, including like a set of Canon K35s, a set of Zeiss Ultra Primes and Super Speeds, some Arri Fujinon Allura zooms, and some crazy Russian lenses he bought off of eBay, which is like, that is not a hobbyist. He's got, a Red V Raptor 8K. He's got, an Angenieux Optimo 28-76 zoom. The guy's, seriously got a gear addiction. And I think that's pretty awesome.
That's way more interesting than he buys expensive cars, although he probably does that too.
He actually does mention that it's kind of a secret that owning this gear, he gets to rent it back to the production and make money on his investment, which is what a lot of people do. So I think it's wonderful. It was really unexpected for me to see Ben Affleck here talking about Air on Film and Digital Times, and then talking about he's a lens geek and a camera geek. And we'll put a link to it in the show notes if you want to read the Film and Digital Times article. And it's a lot of fun. So hey, there are some people out there who are maybe slightly more well known to be into the technical side of things, but Ben Affleck was a surprise for me. I did not know that at all.
I mean, it is a surprise to me. And then again, given that he is an Oscar-winning director, he obviously knows what he's talking about in that realm. But also, like, how many Oscar-winning directors would have that many lenses of their own? Probably none.
How many Oscar-winning directors would just trust someone else that that's their thing, and they don't necessarily want to be shooting, a D camera or C camera or whatever it is. They want to concentrate on what they're doing. But clearly, Ben can bifurcate his brain in that way, where he can operate a camera and direct. And that's amazing. That's impressive.
No, I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'd love to talk to him about it sometime. That'd be great.
Let's get him on the show.
Alana, you've got your work cut out for you if you're hearing my voice. So, it might be a tough get.
I don't know. He might not be that hard. How many people call him up and want to talk about lenses and cinematography? I bet it's not that many.
I don't know. We'll have to find out. So Ben, I think that's just about going to do it for us. Who do we have to thank this week?
Let's start by thanking Alana Cody for lining up all these kick-ass interviews. We got more coming. Let's thank Ben Katz for making us sound halfway cogent, I would say. Hopefully we didn't make his job too hard this week. I don't think it was especially bad this week. And lastly, but never least, let's thank our good friend Kays Alatracci, who I'm going to try and rope into going to see Satanic Hispanics with me, by the way. Him and Zubi Mohammed and I have, like, we go see movies at like 10 o'clock at night now and just fight to stay awake. But let's thank Kays. He composed every scrap of music you've heard in the entire show. Listen to his music, musicbykays.com. Hire him to compose a new score for you, or color correct your film, or do CGI, or direct your goddamn film. He can do all of those things.
He certainly can, without a doubt.
So that about wraps us up. Oh, Ilya, where can people find you?
They can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com.
And you can find me at benrock.com. And I'm not going to say all the same stuff I say every week. Ilya, take us out.
Thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.